Discover the profound power of love, the greatest virtue, even in life's challenges.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, as many of you will know, defines and describes the true nature and of divine love, of the God kind of agape love. That means that in the Bible, you know, when you understand what does it mean when God says he loves me? Now, we don't have time to go through this, but I would really encourage you, if you're taking notes in this, is go and study the whole of 1 Corinthians 13. And you will see that Paul is describing what I would say the length, the breadth, the height, the depth of how far God's love extends and how deep his love goes. Then in verse 13, he says this, and I want you to go there. Verse 13. Paul ends by revealing, I believe, what the Amplified Bible calls the choicest of graces. And he says in verse 13, I'm going to read this out of the Amplified Classic. He says, and now there remains faith, which means abiding trust in God and his promises, hope, a confident expectation of eternal salvation, love, unselfish love for others. Now notice, growing out of God's love for me. Because again, when you look at that word that he uses there is the agape of God. And he says, and even though it's true that we love others, but it should always flow out of God's love for us. Then he says, the choicest of graces. What are the choices of graces? Faith, hope, and love. But then he says this. He says, but the greatest of these is love. The greatest of these. In fact, the word greatest there, actually in the original language, is talking about the most mature. The most mature, the oldest is love. The greatest is love. You see, we find in the New Testament, and I'll encourage you that wherever you read in the New Testament, you will find that literally every place where you read about miracle healings taking place, where miracles took place, you will find these three components: faith, hope, and love is always present. You know, you think about the leper that came to Jesus. You can see when he came to Jesus, he had hope and he had faith, but he wasn't too sure if Jesus loved him enough to do it. Jesus added that love. But that's the component that was there. The woman with the issue of blood, the same thing. She had a hope, a confident expectation. She had a faith that if she could just touch the hem of his garment. And when she did, she experienced a flow from Jesus, which I believe is the unconditional love of God. And then, you know, even the man at the gate beautiful in the book of Acts. Every one of these places you will find that those three components are there. But it's interesting to note that Paul says the greatest of these is love. See, I believe what that is saying to us is that when hope is gone, and you might be here today, there are some times where our hope wanes and faith seems to be weak. It is the love of God that always remains true. The love of God never goes away. Never, it is constant and consistent. And I am convinced that it is from that place of God's unconditional love where healing flows, where healing manifests in our lives.